Good afternoon, evening, or whatever it is when you're seeing me. It's actually Friday the 13th today, is it not? Good grief, I just realized that. This could be a problem. But you're not watching me on Friday the 13th, so hopefully we've made it through. I am Gerald Duquette. This is Put Up Your Dukes, and I am happy to report that this is our 18th episode. Can you imagine that we've lasted 18 episodes? Imagine how many episodes we would have lasted if we were on commercial TV. What do you think? 2? Come on, Sam, be an optimist. All right, well, listen, today's show, I've got some things to talk about here. The reason I am alone today is because, well, frankly, the problem with the show has been that all the people that were outraged I was going to have a show have stopped complaining. It appears that I'm no longer controversial, and I've decided the reason why I'm not getting the controversy is I'm having nice people as my guests, and that's a problem. You can't keep having reasonable, good people on and expect, pitchforks and people on the lawn yelling at you. So I've got to have a couple of shows where I'm all alone and I say crazy stuff, at least crazy enough to get people angry at me so that they'll, complain to the station I should be put in prison. Otherwise, what fun is all this? Now, another thing that that works perfectly with this is I've been asked a lot lately about Rush Limbaugh. Rush Limbaugh, who is obviously a very interesting character, no matter how you slice it. People say, well, what's with Rush Limbaugh? What's the deal with this guy? He's the new Republican chairman or what have you, all of which is sort of not exactly true. But, it's an interesting phenomenon, Rush Limbaugh. Rush Limbaugh is a kind of a guy who, frankly, isn't that unnecessary. I have a strange take on him, I guess. I mean, I don't disagree with other liberals that it's good that Rush is out there saying crazy stuff because it makes liberals look good. That's sort of true, but by the same token, I don't think people appreciate the role that Rush and, what's that lady's name, Sam, who needs a sandwich real bad? What's her name? Coulter, Ann Coulter. These folks have a role to play, and I don't think we appreciate it enough. Frankly, their role is to keep a certain segment of the country revved up. They're part therapist, part cheerleader for a group of Americans that, you may not want to invite them over to dinner, but we kind of need them. And here's what I mean. The United States is a very boring country when it comes to ideological politics because we've only got one. We're all basically liberals. We're individualists, is what I mean by liberal. And so we've got sort of two wings of the same bird. It's not that exciting. And were it to happen that one wing were to be lopped off and thrown away, we'd be in serious jeopardy. So it's not a bad thing that there are people out there who are propping up the wing that is the least viable today. In other words, obviously in the last decade, conservatism in action has not worked out so well. Were conservatism, especially economic conservatism, were that to sort of die off, we'd be in serious jeopardy. Because quite frankly, free market theory is important, even if we think it isn't descriptively correct. It's a very important touchstone. It's a very important thing to keep in center stage. We couldn't afford having our country go off to the left any more than we can having it go off to the right. So we have to. I think you need to get a little perspective when you're sort of worried that the Rush Limbaughs or Ann Coulters of the world are going to take over the place, and that you have to understand that they're preaching to a crowd that is important, as I said, to maintain, because we need people that are going to be, are going to be passionate about conservatism, just like we need people to be passionate about progressivism or what have you. You got to have the passionate folks, and the most passionate folks are never going to be the most reasonable. That's one of the downsides. The more passionate you are, sometimes, being reasonable and passionate, it's difficult to maintain. So, in this time when, sort of real world conservatism is basically trashed, we need somebody to make sure that the people who believe that's the more effective approach to government, we don't want them to be, we really don't want them to all become Democrats. That would be a bad thing. We want conservatives we want the Republican Party, quite frankly, to stay alive. We want the Republican Party to be viable. Quite frankly, the Republican Party's lack of viability in Massachusetts isn't really good for Massachusetts. It would be actually better for us if we could get those guys to get their act together and really compete for office in this state. But, the point is that when you're looking at Rush or you're listening to Rush or whatever and you're thinking, I can't believe that this guy's got a national audience, you have to remember that the news media, the commercial news media, follows anybody who will make news. And a guy who will stand up and offend 80% of the country is newsworthy. right? If I'm going to offend 80% of the country and do it flamboyantly, that's a great thing to cover. And so don't be so upset. He's not talking to you unless you're someone who thinks of yourself as a ditto head. He's not talking to you, right? So why should his points bother you? He's just keeping his people, if you will, revved up. And you have to realize, I think, that without both sides having enough revved up fans, it's going to be very difficult to keep a real serious, reasonable argument going between left liberals and right liberals, which, by the way, is what we have in America. We have left liberals and right liberals. On the left, we have Democrats. On the right, Republicans. But we don't really have conservatives in the real sense of the global sense of that word. We're all liberals, quite frankly, which is to say we're all individualists. So I want to just make sure everybody understands that all the Rush Limbaugh news is not a bad thing. In fact, it's what the press does. They cover the things that are unusual. They cover minority positions, right? It's ironic, really, that that people are complaining about the media, and then Rush gets a lot of media. Well, it's the same reason, in other words, conservatives complain that the media concentrates on liberal special interests. Well, they're obviously the thing is they actually concentrate on anything that sort of is unusual and will try to grab a larger audience. And offending people is extremely effective. And by the way, political scientists who study public opinion research, etc., there's really no consensus that ugly politics is bad. I mean, most studies indicate that the uglier the better in terms of people paying attention. Rush Limbaugh makes everybody pay attention, liberal, conservative, and otherwise, just because he's flamboyant, which is, of course, why he's very commercially successful, which may be why we probably are on cable access. So I've got to be a little more outrageous. See, that's my point. I've got to be less reasonable. That's the key to what we're trying to do here, which I guess is either info or edutainment. And so we got to get the tainment part in here. So soon, think of something offensive I can say, Sam, will you? And I'll stick that in later. I hear yelling from the back. Have they got a suggestion?
Yes, we want to cut to black.
All right. Oh, and one comment about poor Michael Steele of the Republican National Committee. Michael Steele doesn't seem to understand that it's not. Right now, what the Republicans need is a cheerleader and a therapist. They just lost they just had the worst 2 election cycles of a party in modern history. You don't need reasonableness right now, okay? The party needs to, have this guy out there revving him up. Michael Steele, the poor guy, keeps coming out and saying things that everybody knows are true, but that they don't need to know right now. Give them 6 months to lick their wounds and rah-rah with Rush and Ann. That's, I think, what he's making that mistake. So he, calls Rush Limbaugh an entertainer. What's he trying to do? And then the other day, sort of admitting accidentally that he's pro-choice, the idea that they're a big tent party is a good thing for down the road when they're ready to compete again. But to be honest with you, I think Mr. Steele's mistake is just he's prematurely reasonable. I think that if the liberals had lost elections this bad, and they have in the past, you got to give the crazies a chance to have their day. To get it out of their system, if you will. And then Michael Steele can sort of come in with reasonable Big Ten ideas about how to grow the Republican Party, which are really important because there's no Democratic Party without a Republican Party. There's no decent debate in this country, such as it is, without a viable 2-party system, at least 2-party system. So don't fret too much if you think that Rush and Ann or whoever are taking over the world, because if his listenership quadrupled, he'd still be talking to a fraction of the country, and and he would be intentionally offending you. So don't worry about it. And now I've got to figure out how to intentionally offend you too, so you'll pay as much attention to me as you do Rush.